Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Climate Change and Children's Rights. It's hosted by Trøndelag County Council and Norwegian University of Science Technology. First, I want to introduce myself for those who might not know me. My name is Marit Ursin. I'm an associate professor in childhood research at the Norwegian Center for Child Research at the Department of Education and Lifelong Learning. I run this annual children's rights course, do teachings and supervision concerning children's rights, and I also do research related to these issues. This seminar has turned into a webinar this year because of the current corona pandemic. So we're trying our best, despite some technical difficulties, to run the seminar anyway. It's part of our course, and it's supposed to be like a dialogue between our students, researchers, NGO, official institutions, and other actors who are working with children's rights on a daily basis. And this is all part of our master program at NTNU, MPhil in Childhood Studies. So I would really like to welcome our students who are now currently all over the world because of the pandemic, and I hope you're all watching. So to set the agenda concerning children's rights and the climate politics, we all know that millions of children and youth have been participating in climate protest all over the world. Just last year, I myself witnessed such protests both in Trondheim and in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Greta Thunberg has become the symbol of this protest, or what could you call it, like a wave of protest, and her Fridays for Future has become really famous. What we want to discuss today and look into is whether there's room for children and youth in climate politics. So we do know that participation and non-discrimination are fundamental to well-functioning democracies. When it comes to children and youth, it's largely adults who define whether and how they should participate in society. Young climate activists have met criticism by politicians and in the public debate. They are often discriminated on the basis of age and widely held presumptions, rooted in a notion of childhood as characterized by play and fun rather than responsibility. It's assumed that children and youth do not have the mental capacity to understand political issues, rendered as immature or incompetent. They are seen as political apprentices, as passive recipients of adult learning and knowledge. We also know and have heard in the media that a lot of these young activists have experienced harassment and feel that they're being excluded from the political sphere. The political participation of children and youth reflect their position in society today. Their school strikes reveal that they have either tried out or lack alternative channels. In Norway, dropping compulsory schooling to protest is considered civil disobedience by the government. And their school absence is reckoned invalid and they risk not getting a diploma. So what we often think is that they should learn about democracy and not through democracy. But I, as many others, strongly believe that children have unique insights, interests, and experiences needed in the climate debate. So the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, shortly UNCRC, came into being in 1989. And even though we do not often think about it, in this seminar we will use it as a framework to discuss these issues. So we will start out to see whether it is of relevance for the contemporary climate debate. First of all, who do we talk about when we talk about children? So In Article 1, we hear that a child means every human being below the age of 18. So this is the group that we are mostly referring to in this seminar. Second of all, it's Article 2. It's the article of non-discrimination. So when we're talking about children, we're talking about children all over the world, independent of class, ethnicity, sex, religion, whatever. Then it's the Article 3 that we will come back to, which is the best interest of the child must be a top priority in all decisions and actions that affect children. And we must remember that this convention has been ratified by all countries in the world except the US. So this is a global convention. Article 6, every child has the right to life. Governments must do all they can to ensure that children survive and develop to their full potential. So this is an obligation of all governments. And then Article 24, which states that every child has the right to the best possible health, including clean water, nutritious food, and a clean environment. And also stating that richer countries must help poorer countries to actually achieve this. So let's return to the principle of the best interest of the child. What does it actually entail? This is one of the 4 general principles, and it should be used in the interpretation of all other rights in the convention. And it actually involves all decisions and actions that directly or indirectly affect children. So all kinds of politics actually in some way or the other affect children, and then it should be considered what is in the best interest of the child. However, what we do know is that it's really an elusive concept and it's open for interpretation. So who should define what is in the best interest of the child? Is it the children who decided, the politicians, parents, or other stakeholders? And also, who are the children? Is it today's children or children in the future? Also of outermost importance is, of course, the participation rights. So there's a list of rights in the UNCRC who state that children should have the right to participate in society. The most famous one is Article 12, stating that every child has the right to express their views, feelings, and wishes in all matters affecting them. And also that their views should be considered and taken seriously. In addition, there are other articles. They have the right to freedom of expression, to freedom of association, but also that the media should provide information that they understand, and also that they should not be exploited in, for instance, political activities. So what does this actually entail in real life? It means that they have the right to be informed. In Norway, we do know that we have a TV broadcasted news for children. We also have a special newspaper for children, so they can be informed in a way they understand, and that take into account that they have the other ways of processing information. They also have the right to be heard. This entails that we have to make sure that they feel secure and are in environments where they're able to express their views in a way they're comfortable with. But it's not enough to be heard. They also have to be listened to, so we have to take it seriously. But we also have to bear in mind that children's rights to participation is not a right. It's a right. It's not a duty. So we can't force them to take part in politics, in the climate debate. And we have to make sure that they don't feel burdened by a big responsibility. So it has to be on their premises. And we always have to weigh participation versus protection and make sure that children are not used as mere symbols or as tokens in the climate debate. In this webinar, we will approach climate debate with the focus on children's living rights. This is a concept introduced by Hansson and Eunice, and it entails not only perceiving children's rights as the convention, but actually how it is being done and practiced in real life. So the concept embraces all the different ways that we work with children's rights, including all different actors, partly illustrated in this slide. So amongst them is children, but it's also national law, international law, different NGOs working, the court system, politicians, public discourses, and media. And I think it's important to remember when we talk about children's rights that we're talking about children's rights always as in the making. It's nothing final. It's what's going on from day-to-day basis and how it's being lived out, and always emerging in these encounters, both by implementing by the governments, but also acts of resistance, for instance, by children, families, and others. So today from 9 until 12, we're going to have a wide range of presenters. I'm truly grateful for all the different presenters who will participate today. We had to change it to a webinar, so there's different kinds of formats of the presentations. Some will be streamed online, others will be shown in video recordings, and there will also be a slideshow. We've tried to embrace the diversity on all the different approaches to work with children's rights in the climate debate, and also to show the complexity of this in real life. So I think we will just move on to the next. If you have any questions concerning today's program, I think it's the best to see on the Facebook page. You can follow the program there and also read more about each presenter. And if there's any questions to the presenters, you can post them on the chat on YouTube, and we will try to answer as many of them as possible. And we really hope that there will be questions and comments. So I think then we just move on to the second presenter, Karen Espelund. She's the County Director for Culture and Public Health in Trøndelag. She will present the paper, Is There a Place for Children's Voices in Politics Concerning Climate?
Thank you, Marit, and hello to everyone. Then I will open my presentation, have some good help on that. So the question from my presentation is there a place for children's voices in politics concerning climate? And as we have got the global framework presented now by Marit, this will show the Norwegian framework in general. I will guide you through some of my views, which probably will indicate that we do have a lot of the formal framework in place. The question is this enough to hear children's rights, not only learning about the democracy, as you used as a term, but being in the democracy, and how are their views really considered in the decision making. So then you can turn to the next one. I think we also need to have some characteristics of the Norwegian society, which you might have also been told before, but this is my view on it. We do have the organized structures for children's participation in formal structures, both on municipality level and on the county level. it is part of the local and regional development as a formal position. We do, for many, many years, have a Planning and Building Act, which also regulates the participation from children as a legal right. We do have organized structures for children's participation at all school levels. What also characterizes Norway in comparison, maybe global, is that we do have strong institutions at all levels, and we do have confidence in our institutions. This is also shown now in the corona crisis, that we believe in what the government says, we believe in what our institutions say, and we do follow because there is a confidence. And what we also do need to highlight when we talk about children and youth is the strong and very numerous volunteer sector, which also characterizes Norway. I'm not saying in opposition to other countries, but this is the characteristics of Norway. We take the next one. If we try to define also where do children live their lives, this is not rocket science in any way. There is a family which might function or not be a little dysfunctional, but the family is one position for a child. It's the kindergarten or the school, and in Norway almost every child is in the kindergarten. And it's the leisure time, which means the voluntary sector. It's about sports, music, it's organized by the NGOs, and it's driven by the volunteers. I come back to it a little bit because this is also an arena to set some agendas concerning children's rights, also in the climate perspective, the social sustainability and all these questions. But my main point is, which I always tend to say, is that people live their life locally. They live in the communities, they live in the districts. So that is the three areas for thinking on children's participation on different levels. If we go to the next one, I will just try to describe a little bit the civil sector, because this is such an important part of the Norwegian society, as I already mentioned, but also especially for children and youth. I've tried to describe, and that is a factual description of a municipality having about 4,000 or 5,000 inhabitants, where you see a total of 112 volunteer organizations. Sport is dominating often. Almost every child almost everyone is participating either in a sports organization, in choir, brass band, children's organizations. This is actually also the framework for very many of our children locally. And you see how they divide the local organizations represented. A neighborhood association is a type of organization in a building or a living area where they might agree on how to handle the snow at winter time, or how to actually build also the lighting system. So that is also part of the Norwegian volunteer sector. Also show this is not only one typical, it's typical for the Norwegian local communities. And here and I can use an example of participation from children that's almost 7 out of 10 12-year boys play football in Norway. 3 out of 10 girls do it. That is the biggest volunteer organization, but also other sports are huge as the other ones, as I tried to describe. But many children tend to leave when they are 15, 16, 17 years, then they leave these activities. And that is also for me an indication that children's participation and voices are not listened to good enough, because they don't find that their activity in the civil sector suits what they want anymore. So that is a learning point. Okay, the next one. If we go to what is actually required at regional level, we do have an ombudsman for students and apprentices. It's organized by the county, which also can take up the individual challenges a pupil might face in their school time. We do, in the county level, also have part of the county's formal political structure. It's now legal by law that you shall have a youth council up to the 19 years of age. The reason for the age of 19 is that is when the upper secondary school ends. And this council is elected by the youth themselves. We do have an equivalent organization at municipality level, also a children and youth council. The civil sector, which is basic active on local level, but they also are very well organized. So you do at regional level also have a lot of children and youth councils, different organizations representing these youth organizations at regional level. We do also, and in Trøndelag, this county, these civil sector organizations, children's organizations, also have a common regional youth organization organized at county level, and the secretariat is handled by the county administration. So we do try to work with these volunteer organizations and the youth organizations in formal positions and in the formal way of handling our decision-making processes. If we look at the next one, we look at the municipality level, because that is where the main politics and the main decisions are made in the municipalities. It shows that the number of youth councils has developed. The blue color indicates functioning youth councils and the development from August 17 till now, possibly August 2020. And I have to then say that these youth councils are mandatory in the new law for the municipalities from the autumn of 2019. The Regional Youth Council has had as one of their mandates to help and support the municipality youth councils. So how do they get in contact? How do they be taken seriously by the local politicians? What are their agendas? How can they make their voice be listened at the municipality level? So that has been a central activity for the Regional Youth Council. Then we go to the next one. So this is the challenge I see from summing up. We do have all the formal structures for participation in place. And what about climate and their focus? The Regional Youth Council at county level has had a huge focus on climate. It's a central part of their ambitious 4-year plan. And they are given the formal position to address the county council at their every meeting. They are allowed 15 minutes of address. The issue they can choose themselves, and they always use the opportunity to talk to the county council. And they are the only ones allowed to have applause in the county council's handling, and they always get applause. So the question is this enough in order to say they are taken seriously or not? I will be followed after my presentation by Tove Eivindsen, who is one of our politicians at county level, and she will probably respond to that. This youth council at county level can give formal input to all plans and all political issues, and they use the opportunity. So their decisions are distributed to all the political bodies in the county, and we do see some of the tracks of what they give input on in some of the final political decisions. So yes, there are tracks to find from their input. But my main challenge, and this is a challenge to ourselves at all level, we do need more methods in how to communicate, how to define and take children's participation in a better way than we do. There is a huge discussion going on in municipalities and counties at the moment on how do we co-create the new policy. And that is challenging our working methods. There is a kind of a ladder in communication where the first step in the ladder is based on that you have to be curious. You have to ask if things can be done in another way. The next step in the ladder is the inviting municipality, where you really want new ideas, new proposals to how things can be handled in a different way. But still, it's the municipality who has defined the understanding of the challenge or the problem. If we moved another way, another step up in the ladder, you have the ambitious municipality, where the municipality cooperates closely with organizations outside also the municipality. You start getting effects on structures and culture on co-creation. The mature municipality has established and chosen systematic co-working with networks. The co-creation is organized by competent people guiding in how to work with that kind of processes. You have research and development, environmental or capacities, also working close with you. And you are very concerned and aware of the potential in co-creation. And then the last step in this type of ladder is the co-creation municipality, where you really have established systems for co-creation. I think we have to admit that we are still in the bottom of this ladder, both when it comes to co-creation with the non-governmental sector, but also especially when it comes to children and youth rights. Because what I try to describe here is that we still lack really the methods, the communication way and understanding, and maybe also based on the understanding of need for resources to help us to find these ways of communication. So by this, I'm trying to sum up and say there is a huge potential also by learning from the non-governmental sector how they also work with children and youth. Some of them have developed better methods for involvement than we maybe have done from the political bodies and from the structures. We always tend, not always, but we tend to involve these voices, and then I include absolutely children and youth voices, often too late. We don't always start early enough. But later you will have an example of how youth was involved in the climate debate, heavily supported also by the Regional Youth Council. So I think on behalf of also the County Council, I can say we are on our way in trying to find new methods, trying to find new ways of communication early enough in order to have the children and youth voices into our work, both on our social responsibility in a broader scale and the climate challenges we all face in a broader scale. So thank you so far.
Sa du noe, Marit?
Thank you very much, Karen. This was really interesting. I don't think we have received any questions, but I was wondering maybe you could briefly explain how we recruit young people for the youth councils before we move on.
That is a good question. We ask the municipalities through these municipality youth councils to nominate to the regional county council. That is held once a year, the big council. It's approximately 100-120 youth, and they elect their smaller group doing the active work during a year, which consists of 15 of the youth. We have tried to be aware of that we don't only want the organized youth, which you tend to reach. So we also open for people who can address as individuals for this county council, the huge meeting, which we have once a year. So we do try to find the voices who are not also part of the very organized civil sector we do have in Norway. And that is another question. How do we reach those who don't are formally organized?
We've received one question from the chat here. Do you include youth voices as an input to climate issues on a national level? Could you say something about that, Karen?
Yes, and maybe Tove, who will follow me in a presentation, might also give some supplement to that. But also the government has different organized groups they talk to, and I think also our Prime Minister had a climate discussion with representatives from the youth groups. So it's also organized those type of arenas for communication on the national level, but our parliament doesn't have that type of youth council in the same way addressing them in their meetings, but there are also very strong structures on the national level on trying to involve the youth and children's voices.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? No. Okay, so then I think we'll move on to the next presenter, Tove Eivindsen. She's the leader of the political party Venstre in Trøndelag, and she's also a deputy member of the Norwegian Parliament. And she will present the paper Agreeing Across Ages. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this great seminar taking place in my living room. I want to start by introducing myself, and my talk is going to be looking back at myself when I was your age. So there's not going to be a lot of political theory. It's going to be probably more anecdotal than most of these talks today. As was mentioned, I'm a politician. At the minute, that's all I do. I actually have so many roles in politics now that I have to have a leave from my job. I usually work at the University Museum here in Trondheim at NTNU. I was born in 1977, so I'm a very old lady. I'm 42 years old. I could be your mother. I'm not, I hope, not that I know of. But when I was your age, it was the 90s. And the 90s doesn't sound, well, for me, as an old person, it doesn't sound like it was very long ago. But it actually was. And I'm going to get back to that. I just want to address the issues that came up in the previous talks about representation of young people. We don't have enough diversity in the political system in Norway, meaning that most of or parliament members become more and more like each other. Very few have higher education, very few have PhDs, and very few have vocational education. There's one guy who worked at as a blacksmith. There's one lady who used to be a personal trainer. But except for that, most people have a bachelor degree, no more nor less. They've spent most of their lives being politicians, not like me, who actually became a full-time politician the year I turned 42. You know, this has been their lives and their jobs all throughout. They come from sort of different backgrounds, but most of them are white. Most of them are straight, even though we have more and more gay or non-cis representatives. And that's not a problem anymore. You know, even Norway has had, for a few days, we had a gay prime minister because the foreign minister had to step in because the prime minister was sick. And that foreign minister happened to be a gay man. So that's not an issue anymore. Our health minister is gay, but we still have a really big lack in representation when it comes to people of different ethnicities, people who are open in not being Christian or atheist. I'm talking about, you know, as far as I know, we don't have any Sikhs or Hindi or Buddhists in parliament. And we have very few people who are differently abled. I don't think anyone in parliament is in a wheelchair, and everybody, and there's no blind people or hearing impaired people, as far as I know. So representation is an issue, even in Norway, where everybody can get an education for free, and you know, there's no, you don't have to go to Eton, or you don't have to have a father who used to be the prime minister. There's still a lack of representation. We've gotten women in, we've gotten homo or non-straight people in, but yeah, we have a long way to go. And we have a long way to go to get more young people heard as well. And the lack of representation is also an issue in youth politics, because Karen Espelund just mentioned how they try and get the non-organized youth into the council for young people. And that's a challenge, because when I meet youth councils in the municipalities and in the county, they are also white and straight and majority population, and you know, the successful kids, you know, and we need to change that. And yes, we give them applause, but I sometimes wonder if we're actually listening. The great environmental issue today in Norway is what we call the ice edge, because the Arctic is getting warmer, so the ice is melting, so there's more sea that's available for oil drilling. And today in the paper it says FrP, the Progress Party, wants to crush Venstre's dream of moving the ice edge further south. So even today, I mean, the biggest political issue, whether or not we should take the risk of drilling for oil in the Arctic, where all the key species that feed marine life in the northern hemisphere are born and live, is reduced to a tug of war between two political parties, because we don't have the level of understanding to say this isn't about two small political parties in Norway. This is a huge issue for the planet. And I'm actually surprised that young people all over the world isn't calling Norwegian politicians and say, grow up. So that was just the frustration from today. So I'm going to take you on a journey back to the 90s. That's when I started becoming politically active, but not in a political party. I started as an activist for young people. It first started because the upper secondary school that was close to where I live, and they had a rule that you had to go to your closest school, was very, very bad. And we all knew that if we went there, we just wouldn't get an education. So I actually campaigned to have my school closed. And that was my first meeting with grown-up politicians from maybe the city or from the actual county council, who wanted to be so kind and nice to us young people that they didn't want to close the school because for us, we needed to live at home. And we tried to tell them, that's not how we feel. We feel that it's more important for us to get a decent education and to be able to go on to university or to be able to have an academic career or even just to survive in society. If we go to this school, we will never understand math. So that was the first meeting of grown-up politicians knowing what is best for us young people without talking to us, without checking with us what is actually how we feel, what are our ambitions, our hopes for the future, and what's important for us to get there. So they were shocked by this big mouth, tall girl with huge curly hair telling them that they were all wrong and using some quite bad language in the process. But what ended up happening is that out of 24 people in my class, only 5 people applied to general studies. So we actually closed the school anyway, even though the politicians didn't want to, I went to another school that offered media. Somebody went to a sports school. We did whatever not to go there. So we can, even though we don't, as young people, always get what we want through the official channels, we can actually get the result we want. But I do recommend using the official channels because we won't get young people into politics if young people don't want to run. And then you have to kind of get into that system of having your name put forward, going to those boring meetings, making your voice heard, telling the election committees that, yes, I want to run as a candidate. And so if young people don't want to be candidates, we can't vote for them. And also in a municipality, you can actually put up like a mark by the names that you want to move up on the list. And for 5 years ago now, the Labour Youth Party had an action where they put marks by all the young candidates. So they got a lot of really young people into the Council of Trondheim by putting those marks. But that you have to have those young names on the list to be able to do that. So to the 90s, when I was your age, and the world, and we were, as a young person, we felt like the adults didn't really take us seriously when we talked about environmental issues or social issues, that we were the first and only people who really understood what the world was like, and that we had all the solutions. And yeah, we just knew everything because we were so young and idealistic. And the world was a different place. And that's why I'm positive that we will also solve the climate change crisis. Because when I look back to the 90s, which wasn't so long ago, we had the Montreal Agreement in 1989 because the big threat in the 80s was a hole in the ozone layer. We were running out of ozone in the stratosphere, so there was a big hole. We had ultraviolet radiation that was going to kill us all. If the Russians or Americans didn't nuclear bomb us first, that was going to kill us. But all the world went, not all the world, but most of the countries in the world got together in Montreal, Canada, and they signed a treaty outlawing, I think it's called phosphorus something, the gases that made the ozone layer have holes. And one of those gases was Freon. And Freon was used in every refrigerator that all of us had in our kitchen. And was also used in aerosol, like in hairspray. I don't use hairspray because this is a natural occurrence. But actually the entire developed world, even my grandparents who, didn't really care about the ozone layer because, it wasn't going to affect them. They bought new refrigerators because the old ones were killing the planet. And we've forgotten those kind of huge successes that we've had because we solved that problem. It takes about 20 to 100 years to take away the effects of the Freon already out there. But, you don't hear about that anymore. You don't wake up in the morning worrying about the hole in the ozone layer or ultraviolet radiation anymore because we fixed it. As a planet, we fixed it. And that's the big takeaway for me is that international cooperation has to happen. And that's the same with Arctic oil drilling. It's the same with rainforests. It's the same with ice melting in the mountains. These things have to be solved in international treaties. Each and every country can't look at their own economy and say, well, we have to have this oil or we have to have this soya production or whatever. The global community has to say, well, that's nice, but you can't. Just like my grandparents had to get a new refrigerator, far from South America, which was really feeling most of the early effects of the ozone layer shrinking. We had Chernobyl in the 80s, massive nuclear explosion in what is now Ukraine, or Belarus? No, Ukraine. And the country that got most of the effect was obviously the Soviet Union. But the second country was Norway. So we had an issue here where we couldn't eat reindeer meat or we couldn't eat mushrooms from the mountains for years and years and years because of something called becquerel, which is a radiation measurement for nuclear radiation. And we lived through that, and we've almost forgotten that was something that we lived through. And in the 90s, also geopolitically, in Europe, there were wars in Europe. There was wars in Yugoslavia that were just awful. Going to London was a risk because the IRA was bombing. Because the Good Friday Agreement wasn't signed until 1998. So terrorism in the 70s and 80s and 90s in Europe was awful. There was a lot more terrorism then than there is now. But if you look at the news, it sounds like that terrorism is something quite new. So we have to remember that this isn't the first crisis that we have faced. Europe now is so peaceful that people from all over the world run to Europe from their wars. So we have fixed a lot of things, and that's what makes me optimistic. And I have a lot of time for activism and for people sharing their opinions on social media and whatever. But my advice is to combine that with getting involved in the official channels, putting your name on the list, running for government, and try to change the system from within. Because you can have all the demonstrations you want outside of parliament, and you can press or click like and heart as much as you want on Facebook. It doesn't really change much. You have to get into the political programs. You have to have your issues written down in the political strategies, because then when we get to parliament, that's how we have to vote, because that's the election program that we got voted in on. And another kind of piece of advice for me is to not, there's an expression in Norwegian about making the best the enemy of the good. Because sometimes to get enough support for a political issue, we have to settle for good enough. If we go for perfection, we will never get it through. And then we'll get 2 votes from Venstre and it's dead. So sometimes you have to compromise, but never, of course, on environmental issue, but we have to give and take. For example, we wanted billions for railroad in Norway. We got that, but then we had to accept that there would be also more freeways for cars. And so it's not always easy, but as long as you're not in a country that only has one party, you have to compromise. So sometimes it's okay to settle for good enough because it's better than nothing, even though it's not as good as perfection. One last thing from me, the language we use. We started out talking about global warming, and some people, especially in Scandinavia, thought global warming was a great thing because we're tired of being cold. So we didn't really take it seriously. We didn't understand that it wasn't only warming, it's also going to be more extreme weather, more water, more flooding, more storms. And every month now we're doing a record, oh, this is the coldest March on record, or we had drought in Norway 2 summers ago. We had forest fires. We have floods in the mountains. That's never happened before. So global warming isn't the right term. It doesn't really cover what we're talking about. And then we got into climate change. More of us now are only talking about climate crisis because it is a crisis. And the British newspaper, The Guardian, has actually now made it the editorial line that they're only referring to the situation as a climate crisis. They've stopped using climate change. And I think that's an important change that we all have to get used to. And I sometimes slip. I'd probably said climate change 40 times in this short talk. But I think it's important that we address it as a crisis because it's something that happens now, and the effects will be with us for hundreds of years. Like the effects on the ozone layer is still with us, but getting better. So we have to not leave it only up to young people. We have to make people my age and older realize that this is not something we applaud. Oh, look at the cute young people talking about the environment and climate crisis. This is a crisis we live in. And that's very important to me to get across, that this is something that affects every age. My life is going to change because of the climate change. It's not going to affect only younger people because it's already happening. And that might bring us to the uncomfortable part. We as Norwegians might not be able to drill for all the oil and sell all the oil that we have. We might not be able to go to Spain every year on airplanes. We might not be able to buy cheap clothing from Asia every time we just feel like having something in another country. We have to reduce the way we consume. There's a lot of luxuries that no longer are luxuries in Norway because unlike only 20 years ago, everybody goes to Spain if they want to. I mean, because people can afford to do that. So we need to not have less happy lives, but we need to find more happiness in more environmentally sound habits. And we need to look at the food we eat. We need to eat more Norwegian goat and less avocados from South Africa or South America coming over here on airplanes. And yeah, we just need to change our lives, each and every one of us, because we can't expect upcoming economies like China and India to take all the downside of the climate crisis, because now that they're finally money for the private consumer in China to buy a car, we can't expect them to keep using a bicycle because we have 2 cars each. So we need to have international, not only collaboration, but also solidarity that, okay, the industrialized world were the ones that ruined the climate in the first place, but we can't expect the rest of the world to fix it for us. We have to have some very uncomfortable discussions at home as well about what are we not going to do anymore because of the climate change crisis, not only in Parliament, but actually in our home. So that's what I wanted to tell you that the 1990s were awful, but we did get grunge music, so it wasn't all bad. Yeah, that was bad as well. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tove. That was really inspiring for us who remember the 90s. I don't think we have received any questions yet. I was just wondering, a brief question, whether you feel, you talk a lot about diversity in terms of representation, and of course this also involves young people. So do you feel, is it your impression that the official authorities actually strive to have this diversity within young people who are being able to talk with the governmental institutions, or is it just like a tick off, as long as you're young enough, that's good?
I think it really depends on the individual politician. Our youngest person from Venstre in government now is 21. He's the political advisor of the Minister of Knowledge. So he's responsible these days for opening kindergartens and schools again. And of course, having a person that was in upper secondary education 15 minutes ago in that position is a huge value. So, and of course, he's taken seriously. He's a political advisor, just the same as all the rest of them. Sometimes I think it's just a tick-off. I'm sorry to say. It's the same with certain political parties when they meet people who are differently abled. They have this meeting with all these people in wheelchairs, and as soon as they leave the room, it's like, okay, we've done that. And they haven't really listened. And that's the same with women's issues or young people's issues. It depends on the politician. But what's really important, as I try to get through, is that we need young people not only as people who meet politicians, we need young people as politicians. So we need people not only to be involved in activism, but also to try and go that official route, being out, find a political party. There's never going to be a political party that you agree with 100%, but find one that you mostly agree with. And also try and get involved in the actual political party, not the young party, because you can be on the list for election from the year you turn 18. We try to change that till 16, but it's still 18. And so as soon as you're 18, join the actual political party and try and get those old guys to listen, because if you're in the young party, you probably all agree on climate crisis anyways. So try and get the dust out of the corners in the old people's parties and get involved. And mostly, I mean, especially on the local level, if young people turn up to one of those meetings, the old people get so happy because they probably haven't talked to anybody young except for their grandchildren for so many years. So to have young people interested in what they're doing as a political party is a huge inspiration. So you'll be more than welcome. They might get annoyed if you actually have opinions, but they'll get over it.
Sounds really good. And all kinds of young people as well, right? Yeah. Thank you very much, Tove. We're going to talk more about actual involvement with children and young people in the climate politics here in Trøndelag County Council. Last summer, Lynn and I were invited by the County Council to try to develop a methodology and kind of a workshop on how to include young people's voices. So we were invited by Mari, who's online now, and her colleague Kjersti, and they will talk about some of the ideas behind this climate workshop and also how they worked around it. So go ahead.
Thank you, Marit. So my name is Marit Ursin. I'm sitting here together with Marit in the same room, but on a safe 2 meters distance. I work in the county administration. You have previously today heard my colleague Karen Espelund, who is the county director, and Tove Eivindsen, as a regional politician talk. This part of the program, as Marit says, we would like to present a project related to participation in climate policy. How can we involve youth in a representative way, removing the power structures, the barriers, and also giving the youth that we invite a feeling of empowerment? For us, that was a challenge, and we, working in the administration, it is also crucial importance that we cooperate with the academic institutions to ensure that we work according to the best available knowledge. The climate issue is a very technical issue, and we have good institutions ensuring solid data on how the climate develops, good climate models, but how to do the involvement related to inhabitants. We contacted here Marit Ursin and her colleagues, and we've had a great learning curve related to the project we did on climate. And we have, for this, prepared a short clip for you, but I would also like to encourage you to pose us questions and reflections on on this clip, and I hope that you can post them in YouTube so that we can have some comments and discussions afterwards.
Hello. I work as a climate coordinator at the Trøndelag County Council. Together with Kjersti, I will tell you about how we worked to involve the perspectives of youth in the regional climate transition strategy. We are proud of that we started the process with the climate workshop, where young people from the whole region were invited to participate with their thoughts and opinions. The results from this workshop provided a valuable foundation for our further work. My job as a climate coordinator is a position in the administration. I am not elected, but I am employed as a bureaucrat and have the regulatory framework and political priorities as a guideline for my work. In March 2019, as we started the climate transition strategy work, a new record was set in the number of participants in the Fridays for Future school strikes. The county politicians decided that it was of great importance to include the opinions and invite the young people in Trøndelag to participate in the development of the strategy. But how to do that? How to involve? I asked my colleagues. I got smiles. That sounds like a challenge. We made a working group where youth who are used to work with the county council, but also youth from other environmental organizations came together to discuss how to set up a good framework for participation. We set up a program for a weekend from Saturday lunch to Sunday lunch in order not to collide with the obligatory school hours. The youngsters told us, we don't want a lecture. We want to reveal our insights. And we listened to the advice from Marit Ursin and her colleagues, and to not use experts, but to let the participants themselves facilitate during workshops and group work. There were no experts on climate change present during this weekend. We wanted the participants to share their insights and knowledge with us. We posted the invitation by mail to all upper and lower secondary schools in the county, and we used social media to spread the invitation and the ads about the climate workshop. What the young people told us, Kjersti will now describe to you.
Hi, I'm Kjersti. I'm an advisor at the County Administration, Department of Regional Development. We want to share with you the recordings that came from the youth at the workshop. We will talk about the topics food, building, transport, energy, plastic, consumption, and what opportunities the youth sees in these areas. Throughout, the youth have a focus on local production. The main message from the youth at the workshop is that they look positively on the future. They envision a society where you have better time, greener surroundings, better quality of life, and a stronger community. More locally produced food, solar cells on buildings, better train and public transport, less plastic waste, and more knowledge related to sustainability in society in general and in the schools. If the youth's vision is achieved, most of the food we eat in the future will be locally produced, in season, and delivered to us from local farmers. The amount of food waste is virtually at a zero, from both private persons and organizations alike. In the future, the houses we live in will have changed to accommodate a greener way of living. Most people will live in a house that have a function for energy harvesting and storage, and the house will produce more energy than it uses itself. The total living space is smaller, but with smarter solutions. And of course, in the future, buildings are built using wood and recycled materials. The cities we live in are greener because we understand that we must preserve the diversity of species both in the plant and animal habitat. Deforestation is reduced and we plant more trees than we cut down. The topsoil is preserved for food production and no one even thinks about laying roads on top of it. One theme that I find illustrates young people's way of thinking is transport. Because where we can find all adults cringing in fear over the prospect of giving up their cars, young people's focus is on reaching their desired destination. They want fossil-free public transport, which works both in rural and in the city areas. Trains with multiple departments, bullet trains and double tracks are all part of their vision for the future. This is one of the few areas where the youth wants to put out restriction in the form of financial sanctions against both aircrafts and cars. Related to energy, green renewable energy must replace oil and coal for the youth's vision to be accomplished. And we must develop solutions for fossil-free plastic and make it difficult to use disposable plastic. In the future, waste is a resource used in a circular economy. We will repair, fix, and share. In general, young people intend to shop less, but more locally, with better quality and less packaging. The young people envision that the consumer mentality we see today is really old-fashioned in the future. Then there will be no fast fashion. There are good eco-labels on clothes, and all clothing stores carry eco-labeled clothes. As you see, we got a lot of input from the youths. After we got the report, we have communicated both the work process and result on various conferences and seminars.
To wrap it up, I will now explain shortly what we have done with the input from the youth and the way further. The climate transition strategy of Trøndelag is based on the input from the young inhabitants. We have complemented it with knowledge from international climate research and national expert papers on how to tackle climate change in Norway. The report from the Youth Climate Workshop provided the foundation for workshops with adult representatives from other organizations in the region, such as private business actors, national authorities, and non-profit organizations. The perspectives from the young population is much in line with the expert opinion. We need a transition. There are a lot of fundamental changes that we have to do. I have an example regarding car transport. We can make more fuel-efficient cars and say that that is climate friendlier. The problem is the rebound effect. Although cars have constantly become more efficient in the last decades, they pollute more because we use them more. We can develop new low-emission cars, like electrical cars. The problem regarding resource use and discarding them and constructing the roads that they need to use will still be high. So, in order to live in the most sustainable way, we need to give up the idea that we need to own a car, every one of us. We can share a car in a carpool and an electrical car so that we have access to mobility when we want it and when we need it. The climate transition strategy is now out on a public hearing until April 30th. We will then make adaptations to the strategy according to what public and private organizations have given us as an input during the hearing process. The final strategy will be presented to the regional county politicians in June. It was a great experience to work with the young people in Trøndelag on the climate transition strategy, and we hope that the close collaboration and involvement on this issue will continue and deepen, both in the short term, despite of the corona situation, and in the long term, as we continue to work on the climate transition every day, step by step, into a beautiful future for the planet and for all of us. Thank you for your attention.
So I hope you enjoyed our perspective from the bureaucratic side and a summary of the insights that we had from the climate workshop. We have also asked one of the participants, Anni-Lea Smalundsmo, to tell you about how she experienced to be a participant at the climate workshop. Anni-Lea is 14 years old. She lives in Rennebu, but she attends the International Lower Secondary School in Trøndelag. And we will show you her experience now.
Hello, my name is Anni-Lea. I'm 14 years old. I live on a farm in Rennebu with my family, and I go to Trondheim International School. In this video, I want to talk about an eye-opening experience that I truly won't forget. Firstly, I've not always been aware of the climate changes and global warming issue that is ahead of us right now. I've not always tried to do the best thing for the environment. Frankly, I just thought it was another subject that people talked about. I didn't quite understand what was so serious about it. I didn't understand the story behind the making of different products and what I contribute to when I purchase those products. I mean, our future is a result of how we've been living for the past 100 years. And I mean, everything is so much easier now than what it was before. We can buy food instead of growing it on our own, and we can literally travel across the ocean in a matter of hours. But unfortunately, this way of living life has a negative effect. Do we know how we can change our way of living? How can we inspire others, and how can we change the cycle? My first experience raising awareness was at a climate strike. I skipped school for a day and took the train to Trondheim. And I will say that my point of view has changed a lot since then. A few weeks later, I discovered an advert on Instagram about a workshop that was going to happen nearby. Everyone between the ages of 13 and 19 could join. It was our opportunity to spread thoughts and advice about the climate policy in Trøndelag. And it was also our chance to spread awareness about climate change. I had it in mind for the rest of the day, and funny enough, I saw the same advert at a notice board at school the next day. I just could not stop thinking about it. After a while, I asked my parents if I could go, and luckily they said yes. In fact, they were cheering for me to join them. When I first arrived, I was warmly welcomed. Many said hi, and there weren't any problem starting a conversation with someone else. Once everyone had arrived, we gathered into a hall. We got separated into groups and sat at a table with those group members. Once everyone settled down, we had lunch, and it was a perfect opportunity for everyone to get to know each other. While we ate, one of the organizers introduced themselves and showed us what was going to happen throughout the weekend. After that, someone from NU talked about their involvement in the climate issue and what she felt is important within the actions of global warming. and I feel like her presentation played a heavy role in forming the perspective and the attitude that I have now today. There's something about the presentation that was so captivating. She told us that she hadn't always done what she could to help the environment, but it was the events and the people around her that gave her knowledge and inspired her. Hearing her experiences gave me a lot of inspiration throughout the activities that we did. And when it was time for group work, we got a few post-it notes that we were going to write on. We discussed and wrote solutions to different questions we were asked, like, what do we consider a sustainable world? Should we have global change as a unit in school? What are other alternatives for energy and containers for our products? After each group had discussed each question, the group was supposed to present their solution to the other groups. I believe that it is really important to get an opportunity like this, because you might get a little surprised at what other solutions people have come up with the same problem. And perhaps we can create a conclusion combining these ideas together. And there were so many questions being asked that I hadn't thought of before. And to solve these questions, I feel like I had to think in a different way. I had to see from a different perspective. During breaks, I would often ask the people around me what they thought about this event. Some told me it was very exciting with the number of new people that they have met, and how amazing that there are people their age caring about this situation, and the communities that have been formed because of this workshop. Others said that it had encouraged them to think in another way, that their perspective on climate change had changed into a goal that they believe that they finally can reach. Like, it's so close, but they cannot grasp it yet. That there are solutions that we can approach but have not done so yet. That this event is something so special for us, and it made us inspired. It made us connect and figure out solutions together. We were also visited by a few people from the organization Passion for the Ocean. They talked about what they do and what the consequences are if we are mistreating it. And they explained to us why the ocean is so much more important than what we think. For example, did you know that over 60% of the oxygen being produced now today comes from phytoplankton that can only live in the ocean? Anyways, after this we got split into groups of 2 or 3. Each person would get 2 gloves and each group would get a garbage bag. We walked along a nearby river and picked up all the trash we could see in the area. I think we were out for about an hour and we found a lot. But why was this important? Well, they wanted to show us how much we throw away. And our discoveries was a perfect showcase of that. Because if there's so much trash in such a tiny place here in Norway, the amount that is in the world are thrown daily, it makes the numbers about how much we throw into nature and ocean so much more apparent. The rest of the day I got to meet some of the other contestants here at the workshop. It was so interesting to hear their thoughts and opinions about this event. Later, we got to see an artist called Jo Sverre perform a concert for us. It created a good atmosphere and it was a good way to make a social gathering at this workshop. The next day we continued with our group activities. We discussed different ideas for ways to solve the global problems that are happening. And afterwards, we showed them to other groups. You know, when we come up with a conclusion to a question, we tend to think that is the only solution, and it can be hard coming up with salvation from a new outlook. But when we got to see other people's conclusions to the same question, it was an eye-opening experience, because people have diverse skills and backgrounds, and so when our work is being presented to each other, we are able to teach each other new ways of working. As you were going to check out, you could bring something with you. A pencil or a ruler. When I was going to check out, I chose the pencil because there was a seed at the bottom instead of an eraser. It was really cool, and the thought of getting to plant something at home was really exciting. And before I knew it, I was on my way home. On my way home from an experience that I knew I wouldn't forget. And when I was returning home, I kept looking at that pencil. I kept reflecting what made me come here in the first place and what made me more aware about the world around me, and what made me interested in caring about the earth and what made me want to make a change. It was the events that I had contributed to. It was the people that I'd met and the creative thoughts that were made during these activities. And solving a problem with creative and critical thinking made me encouraged to continue. And even getting the opportunities to join events like this is just incredible. You didn't even have to pay for transport on the way there. This whole event was free. Anyone who wanted to could join. That we as young people have a good scientific knowledge, and through it, our attitudes towards environmental stability can help to make good, responsible citizens of this society and be able to make the right decisions that the earth needs for us and future generations to come and continue living on earth. This is our future, so I think it's important for politicians to allocate money for measures that increase the engagement and knowledge of youth. My point of view when purchasing things has become completely different after this weekend. I have become more aware of what materials are in certain clothing, and I often ask to myself if I really need this piece of clothing or if I can find something similar in second-hand stores. This Christmas was the first time my family bought only second-hand gifts for each other. And what strikes me was that I was no less happy. It was quite the opposite. It makes me happy to think that I'm not buying new products that can damage the environment throughout the production. So I am passionate about spreading knowledge and awareness about changes we can make, which together can become a more sustainable way of living life without actually giving up on a good life. I became more aware of what I was buying and what I was throwing away. It is important to share information and experiences about the products and campaigns that work so that others can learn from it and replicate them without having to reinvent the wheel. I know that everyone who joined this workshop is so pleased to have been provided with financial support for this very useful and fun workshop. I hope it will inspire many more people to take climate action and help create pressure for the ambitious and international agreement that we all need. And I would like to thank the people setting this event up. It shows that they can prioritize what is important when it comes to changes and what they can do to spread awareness, engagement and determination. And I would like to thank everyone for giving me and other people this experience. It proposes questions about how we can fix this problem using our creativity and knowledge. It brings us together and makes us connect. And if we continue with these events, I believe that it can not only bring us closer together, but also closer towards the goal to stop these problems. Now, I know that everyone is aware of the global crisis that we are a part of currently, the corona epidemic. The lifestyles for many has changed, but one thing that I've read a lot in the news is that people are lowering their activity level, and that has a positive effect on the environment, at least in cities. That means that we have been reducing the amount of CO2 getting in the air. That means that we humans can change whenever we want to. The challenge of spreading knowledge about the environment and climate in countries that do not have direct major consequences, which destroy our lives, but that seeing the long-term perspective may seem a bit difficult. But that does not mean that it is not important. It's like competing in a competition. When you know you will get the prize right after the competition, it can be more motivating for people than getting the prize after 30 years or more. That is the same we can pull off, but many of us believe that we can just buy ourselves out of problems. If one compares the daily life that we are in now with a possible sustainable day, many people have limitations in their lives, but perhaps not most for themselves, but for those who are sick and old. Then I think it is important that when the epidemic is over, that we take similar measures as done for the climate, to maintain basis of life for future generations on Earth. That is the strongest weapon that we have to spread knowledge and new ideas about this subject. And I believe that we can come up with a solution together. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Thank you to Anni-Lea. During the preparation of the climate workshop, Trøndelag County also worked together with the national organization Eco-Agents. The Eco-Agents is an environmental organization for children in Norway. It was established in 2006. It has more than 9,000 members. The Eco-Agents is a democratic organization, and the children decide what issues they want to work with and what kind of activities they organize. They have a goal of engaging children in environmental issues and made their voices heard. As a representative from the Eco-Agent and also a participant in the climate workshop, Sunniva Kjønstad-Prestvik has prepared a slideshow for you. Sunniva lives in Trondheim, and she's a 5th grade student at Nyborg Primary School. She has a particular focus on how climate activism should be exciting and cool for young people, with competitions and interactive networks like TikTok.
Okay, thank you very much, Marit and Kjersti. And then afterwards, Anni-Lea and the slides of Sunniva. We received some questions and comments on the chat. That's really good. So maybe you Mari, can come with the questions, and then Mari and Kjersti and I will try to answer them.
Absolutely. The first question has to do with if there is any kind of projects that connect climate change issues with the economical empowerment of youth. Do you know of any projects relating to that?
From the county council perspective, we don't have any specific project linking those, although we try to, when involving, to reach out also to those not represented. But I think, Marit, you can comment a bit more about the reasons for this.
I think in the Norwegian context, youth are expected to be in school and are not that often working. So I think maybe in other contexts, in other regions, this would be a more relevant way of approaching how to involve youth in climate politics. If there's any add-on question to that, you can just post it on the chat, I think.
Okay, I think that was actually the only question. There's more reflections that it's interesting to hear discussions reaching school children and how they participate in the debate, and we are encouraged to keep the ball rolling on these kinds of topics. So good job, everybody. I think that was it actually from the YouTube chat, but I encourage everyone who's watching to use the chat if they have any questions or reflections from now on as well.
Super. Thank you, Jomar. And thank you for questions and comments. We really appreciate it. So now we will move on in the last block of the program. We're going to watch a video recording by Helena Lund Blostrupsen. Helena is the vice president of the regional board in Trøndelag School Student Union of Norway. She has sent her paper presentation, Secondary School Students' Rights to be Political Active, and I think it really shows how shows the tension between children and youth's right to education, but also to express their views in what she will discuss. So now we will watch her video.
Hey, my name is Helena Lund Blostrupsen. I am 18 years old and I am the Vice President of the Regional Board in Trøndelag of the School Student Union of Norway, so SSUN for short. I'm here to talk about the students in high school's right to be politically active and what we do in SSUN to increase interest and engagement in politics, and a little bit about the climate strikes as well. So let's start with looking at the laws about absence and attendance, because this is really important if you want to be a politically active student. So if you're going to be away from school because of political work, you have to get your absence documented by a political party or a political organization like SSUN, for example. If you don't get your absence documented, it won't get excused, so your absence percentage may go over the absence limit that were introduced in 2016, which says that you can't have over 10% absence in one of your classes. And if you do have over 10%, you will risk not getting your grades. And if you do have absence without getting it documented, you're risking getting remarks for your behavior. So for students with general studies, getting your grades is more important than having perfect attendance. So a little percentage is not that scary. But if you're a student in vocational studies who soon will be an apprentice, you depend more on your absence percentage to be low enough, because the best places to be an apprentice, they look at your absence percentage when they're hiring. So students like me, who is active in different student organizations and etc., they don't need to worry about this too much, because I get the documentation I need from SSUN when I'm away from school. And we are very lucky, because you really depend on this type of documentation if you want to take part in the political world the way it works today. Because mostly of the strikes and meetings and hearings and these types of things with politicians is during school hours. So if you want to participate, you have to be away from school. And of course, most students are not a part of a political party or a political organization. But this doesn't mean that they can't be politically active, but it does makes it way harder. Because you can always choose to go to these types of strikes, for example, but you won't have your absence approved or excused. So you can go if you have the opportunity to do so, but the students who already has a lot of absence, they have to choose between going to the strike and getting a higher absence percentage, or staying at school but missing the strike. But then again, your absence percentage won't be affected. So you could say that the absence limit is taking away their right to be politically active as a student, because you shouldn't be forced to making this choice. You should be able to do both. So we in SSUN, we know that it is the students and the youth that knows the best how it is to be a student in high school, or a youth in the world that we live in today. So therefore, the students should be a part of every decision and debate regarding them. Like regular employees, students should have the right to strike. And therefore, a lot of our work in SSUN is about empowering students where they are, at their own school and in their own student councils. And we want them to know that their opinion matters, and that they should speak up about what they care about, for example, climate change. And Norwegian law gives students the right to have and participate in a student council at their school. So if they want to participate in a student council and they want to participate in the political world, they have the Norwegian law at their side. But the problem is that they don't know this. Often, students' first meeting with democracy and politics is with a student council. So if their first meeting with democracy and politics is with a principal that does not want to listen or doesn't care, or politicians that doesn't care about their student council, they doesn't care about their opinion on something, of course they're not gonna want to participate in politics later in life, if this is their first meeting with politics. So SSUN is an organization with regional boards in every region in Norway, and a central board that works with school politics in office hours. So I'm going to take you through some of the work that we do as an organization. Every fall, right after summer break and school starts, we begin with our annual student council tour, where we visit student councils all over the country and teach them about how they better can engage in school and local politics through presentations and discussions. And my experiences with these student council tours is that the students get more motivated to engage in the matters that they care about, because now they know how. Because what we see, one of the main reasons students don't engage in school and local politics is that they don't know their own rights and they don't know their own options. And this is one of our main focuses when we visit them, to assure us that they know that their opinion matters and that they can change their own weekday. So you could say that we give them the tools that they need to do or fight for what they want to fight for. We also organize seminars where we invite students and apprentices from our region to meet and have conversations and discussions about local political matters regarding them. And here in Trøndelag, they usually last from Friday to Sunday, so over a weekend. So it's also a social platform where you can meet other politically active students and discuss similar problems, or come up with fun campaigns or ideas together. And we usually have one or two of these types of seminars each school year. But the biggest seminar we have is our annual General Assembly that we call Elevtinget. This seminar lasts the whole week, so Monday to Friday, and it's in Oslo. And on this seminar, around 600 students and apprentices meet and discuss what we should mean politically and what we should prioritize the next year. And this seminar took place in March this year, the week before all the school closed, so we were very lucky with our timing this year. And this meeting is the second biggest meeting in Norway. And this year we got a visit from, among others, the Prime Minister Erna Solberg and the leader of the Norwegian Department of Education, Steffen Handal. So the fact that we are able to organize a seminar like this every year and collect opinions from students all around Norway is quite amazing. We also have a lot of member services for student councils and their schools. We have, for example, a phone number you can call during school hours if you have any questions about your rights as a student or as an apprentice. And we can also offer help with your rights, if that's what you need, of course. But our most used member service is the SSUN fund. And this is a fund that our student councils can apply to for resources, so that they can do things they normally couldn't because the school doesn't have the resources they need. So if they want to throw this huge school gathering or have a campaign for something that they want to fight for, they can by applying to the SSUN fund. So moving on, the biggest political matter regarding students lately has been the climate strikes, obviously. Because we are an organization focused on improving the school system and education of Norwegian students, we don't have politics on other areas, unless it can be tied to our goal of creating a better school. So that means that we don't have politics about the climate itself, but we do support students' rights to strike. So I hope you got the difference. We don't have politics about the climate, but we do support their right to strike up for it. We saw that when the climate strikes came to Norway and the Norwegian student wanted to be a part of it, the authorities said that they would not get their absence approved. So they did say, we love your interest in this matter, but we won't give you your absence approved. or excused. So we think that this is kind of taking Norwegian students not seriously at all, because this is obviously a political matter regarding them, and this is taking away their right to be politically active, because now they have to choose, right? And so just like normal employees, students should have the right to strike. And the students who decided to don't go to school and participate in the climate strikes, they got a lot of different feedback. Some said that it was nice to see the youth be so interested in climate and politics, but others did not agree that much. We saw that some adults came with arguments like they are young and they don't even know what they're talking about. And what's sad about this is not the first time we've experienced adults not taking us seriously. Sadly, we do see that principals, teachers, and adults don't take us students seriously because of lack of experience or a lack of knowledge. We see that some think that student councils and politically active students in organizations like SSUN, that we are playing politics. And this type of thinking, it's outdated, and it's also wrong. And I also wanted to say that a lot of the time we say that we should be listened to because we are the future, and we're going to be the future. And while that is correct, we have to remember that we're also present right now. So yes, we are the future, but we're also now, just like everybody else who is here right now. And therefore, our voices as students, as apprentices, as youth, should be just as much listened to like others who want to share their opinion and fight for what they believe in. Because we are going to be the adults in the future, but we're all here and present right now. And luckily, we do see a very positive change happening in Norway. Youth are more politically active than before, according to forskning.no. But I have to say, in all this, you find teachers, principals, and adults in general who is doing a fantastic job supporting student democracy and politically active students. So it's not just adults who judge students and youth. You find these amazing people as well. But because of our annual General Assembly, we are able to represent the Norwegian students and the Norwegian apprentices at the Norwegian Parliament and in the regions. So a lot of our work is going to meetings, hearings, debates, and conferences like these. But it's no doubt that the most important work that we do is giving the student that doesn't know about their rights and they doesn't know about what option they have. We give them hope, and we give them motivation and the tools that they need to stand up for what they believe in. For example, climate change. So thank you so much for listening. And if you do have any questions, Marit has my contact information. So have a nice day.
Thank you so much for sending us this video recording, Helena. I think if there's any questions directly to her or her organization, the School Student Union of Norway, we can post the email address on the chat so you can send it directly. But if there are other questions, more general questions, you can post them now and I can try to answer them, or with help from perhaps Mari.
There are a couple of questions directly aimed at youth political experiences. I don't know if Mari has any reflections on the topic, even though it might be aimed at someone else, but maybe if you have any reflections, Mari?
Could you post a question, Jomar? I didn't see that.
The first question is, what is political and apolitical in youth everyday life? And the second one is, how do you define political participation? And also a question about reflections on non-institutional youth political participation.
I think, academically speaking, we talk about politics with capital P and with a little p. So politics is actually participating in everything that is going on in everyday life. So what we heard in Karen's presentation was that she talked about how young people participate through different arenas, not only political parties or elections or this kind of more formal institutional arenas. So I think that also should be included, and that also opens up space to actually appreciate how many different ways young people are being involved already in politics. But when we talk about politics with capital P, it's more about these formal institutions. So I can relate that also to the second comment. I'm not sure if that's from the same person, but the non-institutional way of participating in politics. I think especially social media and all the street protests show that there's many different ways to be engaged, and young people in particular are really good in using these arenas, and they're able to reach out to many more young people by doing this than only sticking to these more traditional channels. So I think we see today, and we've seen it through history as well, but because we have the technical facilities and we have social media, it's much easier to be engaged and engage more and reach more young people through social media. And we see it also all over the world in a different street protests not related to climate as well. So I think that's my comment on that.
All right.
Maybe I can add that we saw it during the work with the climate transition strategy that because the people and the youth mobilized through the Fridays for Future strike, the politicians on the other side of the generational gap kind of woke up and thought, okay, we need to look into what kind of opinions and perspectives are out there. And then it's often, or the challenge then happens, how, like Tove was talking about in her presentation as well, how to translate that engagement outside of the political sphere into the political sphere, and to stand up and represent that demand for change, which actually is the message from the Fridays for Future strikes.
Right. I think that was all the questions from the YouTube chat.
Okay, so then we will move on in the program. As I said in the introduction, young people have the right to gain information through media, but also to express their views. And in this, I think media has a really important role. So we really appreciate that we have two journalists who have made a video recording on how they work in our regional newspaper, Adresseavisa, trying to enable youth to participate in the public debate. So now we're going to watch a video recording with Berit Baumberger and Sæba Bajoghli and how they work in Adresseavisen.
Hello, My name is Berit Baumberger. I work as a journalist in Adresseavisa, and we are very happy to be invited to this webinar. We'll be speaking about how we in Adresseavisa are working with young people as political beings in media. And my colleague Sæba Bajoghli is also here with me. She will be... Hi everyone! She will be talking right after me a little bit about some events that she is organizing. So I work as a debate manager in Adresseavisa, which means that I deal with the opinion section. So we'll talk a little bit about how we make sure young people feel safe when they participate in the public debate, and how we work with parents, school teachers and other grown-ups to help young voices be heard. We will also talk about why we always prioritize opinion pieces from young people and what we do to recruit more young writers. And in the end, as I mentioned, my colleague Sæba will talk to you about how we in Adresseavisen, together with NTNU, organized a climate summit for young people. So we go around at schools and in the university and try to recruit more young people to write for us. And then I always talk about, in the beginning, what's the difference between publishing on social media and in our newspaper. Because I think in this difference, a lot of things can be said about why we believe it's good for young people to choose to publish their opinions in news media like Adresseavisen, local newspapers in Trøndelag, or national newspapers. And the main difference between social media and us is that we use a lot of time checking facts and letting people answer properly when they are criticized. We use a lot of time also avoiding personal attacks and helping inexperienced writers. In short, this means using our code of ethics, the Vær varsom-plakat, which is helping us to not only choose which opinion pieces to publish, but also in what way we should do it. And I'll use some examples. For instance, last year we had this guy, Siver, he's 15 years old, who wrote a piece about homotherapy. In general, when the subjects are a bit touchy, we always talk with the parents when they're under the age of 18. Now he's 15, so we spoke with his parents and we did a good fact check on everything that he wrote, because this was a case coming up in Stortinget just before Christmas last year. So when people are under 18, as I said, we speak a lot with their parents, but of course that's not always so, because young people have the right to be heard, and it's not like we should always involve their parents, but when the topic is sensitive, we always speak with the young person first, and then we check with them if it's okay that we contact their parents. But we have a lot of young people, for instance, from political youth parties like the Labour Youth Party organization AUF, or also from other youth parties. And then, of course, we do not contact their parents every time they have something to say. But for instance, with Siver, we did, and we had a good conversation, also because we knew that he might get some reactions to his opinion piece. And in this case, he only had a positive response in social media and also in our debate section. This is another example. Emil, 16. Here he wrote together with his mother. Then it's also easier, of course, because then you have the conversation going between the mother and the son, and you can make sure that the parents are okay with what's happening. He also had a lot of positive response, as you can see from the slides here. The next example is a boy called Trygve, 17 years old, who wrote about the local theater here in Trøndelag, a piece that was set up. I think it was last autumn, and he went to the theater and he absolutely did not like what he saw. So he wrote an opinion piece about that, and also in this case we spoke with his parents, and afterwards I could say it was quite a harsh tone in social media, and we control of course what's on our platforms, social media platforms. For instance, we do a lot of work checking that the comment field is okay, that people are talking about the case, not the person, but we cannot control of course what other people publish online on social media. So here the harsh tone was not of course on our platforms, and in general I can say also when I'm not sure if that happened in this exact case, but when people respond to opinion pieces in Adresseavisa, we make sure that they do it in a, what we call saklig in Norwegian tone. Means that they should talk about what the criticism is about, not who's writing it, whether he's young, whether he's inexperienced, whether he knows what he's talking about or not. They should criticize the case, not the person behind the criticism. And well, this is another example of us prioritizing young people. Last year we had a huge debate in our region about the Abbasi family. That was a young, some siblings from, I think it was Afghanistan, and they were supposed to be sent back from Norway to Afghanistan, and at this point we get a lot of opinion pieces, maybe 30, 40 pieces every day, and this is only an example of us always prioritizing when, for instance, pupils at Storastorm videregående skole, high school, is writing something. We would of course prioritize that, even though many other people also write about the same topic. This is a letter from a third class in Trondheim, writing to politicians in Trondheim, Trøndelag and Norway about how concerned they are about what will happen in the future. Here we were talking of course with the teacher a lot, but that's not enough. We have to get permission from the parents, so we have to make sure that the teacher has a good dialogue with the parents, and when we are sending our own photographer out to take pictures of these children, we have to make sure that the parents are involved and that they are of course accepting us taking these photos. And in this case also they met some criticism afterwards, and when the writers are as young as these, I'm not sure how much they are informed about the criticism, but then of course the teacher has a big responsibility to answer to criticism if that's something they want. This is another example of us prioritizing young writers. Martine, she's 20 years old. She has written quite a few pieces for us. She's a student at NTNU. Now she's also joined I think the Conservative Party here locally in Trondheim. She's I can be honest to say that sometimes what she's writing, we would not maybe publish it if it was an old man or a woman, but we are prioritizing this because she's a young woman. Some people might criticize that, thinking that's not okay, and I know the debate has been in other Norwegian newspapers whether you should have own debate sections for young people only. For instance, Aftenposten, they have a very they are doing a great job with so-called sidene, which are it's a debate section only for, I think, young people under the age of 25 or something. And that's a great idea, at least in big publishing houses like Aftenposten, where they have to compete against the so-called grown-ups. But in Adresseavisa we're not that big, and at least until now, we have always managed to prioritize the young people. It's not like they are competing with the grown-ups. So at least until now, we think it's right to have them in the same debate section as all the other opinion pieces. We had, I think, Marit Ursin, she's one of those who are organizing this webinar. She wrote an opinion piece about the debate, whether it's there is enough room for children and young people as political actors in the climate debate. And here I can say that editing the comments in social media is also a big part of our job, because after she wrote this this opinion piece, we put it out on our social media platforms, and the debate there was not very constructive. There were lots of comments that we had to take away because it was not a good debate, and also they were attacking, for instance, young climate activists instead of talking about the case. So that's also a part of our job, of course. We reach a lot of people. All articles in our opinion section, midtnorskdebatt.no, are open access, which means that anyone can read them, also those who do not hold Adresseavisa. And one opinion letter can typically reach between 5,000 and 30,000 readers just online, in addition to the newspaper. So, and in some cases they reach 200,000 readers. So it's very important that young writers who are publishing in our pages, that they feel safe and that they feel like we are doing a good job. So I think that was about what I was going to say. And now my colleague Sæba Bajoghli will tell you a little bit about a climate summit that we organized for young people in Trøndelag. Should be coming now.
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting us. As Berit told you, we had this climate summit for young people organized in Trondheim in February, and it was Adresseavisen and NTNU who was organizing this together. Last year we had 2 climate summits, and it was a big success with 900 in the audience in the total. And in addition, we streamed the meetings live on Adresseavisen and NTNU's web pages. But after that, my colleagues who were organizing this together with a representative from NTNU, they found that we would like to see even more young people in the audience. They missed the presence of more young people in these meetings, who was organized in the evening time in different places in Trondheim. So they decided that next time we are having a climate summit, we will have it for the young people. So we started this work a few months ago, and we were aiming now this time for people in high school. So this meeting is about how you best work with young people as political beings. And so I will let you know about how we worked with this climate meeting to reach and engage young people in the best way. Before the meeting, we invited different representatives from youth councils in Trondheim and also from the youth council of Saupstad and Kolstad. We had meetings with different youth organizations, environmental organizations, also with principals and teachers. We called them and we asked everyone, what are the topics within climate that will engage the young people the most? what are the questions they have. We also talked to not only the people who were very engaged from before, but also like random 17 years olds who were high school students, and we asked them, what are your interests? What would you like to see in a climate event? What topics are important for you? What kind of meetings engage you? Just to try to make this as relevant and engaging as possible. So when the event started, it was I think it was 1 hour and a half, 2 hours event. We started the show with a few 5-minute lectures just to give an overview of the climate situation with different angles. So we had the Norwegian fact-check media organization, Faktisk.no. They had a poll where they had like 2 different statements, and people in the audience voted for which climate statement they thought were the right one, to try to engage the audience. We also had leading climate scientists from NTNU, and they were also a member of the IPCC, to give an overview of the situation. After these 5-minute short lectures, we also had a political debate. And also in this debate, it was important that the young voices were heard, that we had a platform for the young people to challenge the politicians on a local, on a regional, and a national level. So on the right in these pictures, you see 3 representatives. I think they are 16 and 21, 19 years old, and they are confronting the politicians on different levels in Norway. And it was important to make their voices heard and to have their questions being asked in front of this audience. And after this political debate, we also had a session with experts on the stage, and they got questions from the audience. And it was so many brilliant and engaging questions from the young people in the hall. It shows us that they are engaged and they want to be involved, but you have to make the platform and the event in a matter that they will actually come. We organized this meeting in the school time. We asked the principals beforehand, do you think your pupils would be interested in coming to such an event? And we got help from Trøndelag, fylkeskommune, to spread the information about this event, and we had more than 600 pupils attending this, and it was also streamed live. So it shows us that the young people, they are highly interested, highly engaged, if you give them the right platform and if you make the meeting available in there so they can be able to attend. And we also had, I have been organizing some other events from Adresseavisen, and during the 2019 elections, we had the two main candidates for being for running for the mayor seat in Trondheim. And we had a debate between them, but we arranged the debate in a primary school. And also there they got a lot of questions from the young people. I think they were about 9, 10, 11 years old in the hall after the debate. So this was what we wanted to say, how we worked with young people. And we thank you for inviting us. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you.
And I actually forgot one thing. I told you in the beginning that I was going to say a little bit about how we recruit young people to write for us. And I think I mentioned that we visit high schools and university classes to tell them about how we work and to ask them to write for us. And also we have a cooperation with Barne- og familietjenesten and a local youth council at Heimdal for a podcast with youth. And but if you have any other ideas about how we can engage more young people to write for us, because I think it's fair to say that we still have a way to go with. We still would like to have more young people sending us opinion pieces. We would be very happy to hear from you. So here are our emails. Please send us your thoughts. If you have any questions or ideas, as I mentioned, please feel free to contact us. So thank you for having us, and bye-bye.
Okay, thank you so much to Berit and Sæba. Have you received any questions and comments?
We received one question, which is more of a general question. Parents, they are not a part of the conversation. How can we gain their involvement to support children initiatives in the climate debate?
I think that's a really, really good question. We haven't invited any speakers who actually could help us to enlighten this part of the discussion. But obviously, especially concerning younger children, the parents have a very important role in whether children are engaged in climate politics and also in which ways. I think in Norway, as far as it's possible, we try to reach out to children and young people. This could be rooted in Norway being a very individualized country, but we also know that family background has a lot to say on who's involved and engaged and in what ways they are participating in. So in some circumstances, you can have parents who are not encouraging or directly discouraging children to participate. And in other circumstances, you can have parents who really push the children forward to be engaged. So I think it has a lot to do with family background, and the parents are vital. But still, in all these different fora, we try to involve children as individuals and not as part of families. I think that will be my comment on that. If there's no more questions, I think we will move on to the last presentation.
No more questions. The contact information from the last video, if anyone has questions directly to them, their contact info is in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so before we finish off this seminar, we will have Sultan Zeb Khawaja from Germany speaking for us. Hi, Sultan.
Hi.
He lives in Germany and has been part of the environmental group Extinction Rebellion for over a year. And he will present the paper, The Power of Youth. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Let me just put on my screen sharing. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. All right, perfect. So yeah, when I was asked to do this presentation, just so you guys know, I'm not from Norway. I'm actually originally from Pakistan. Just a few facts about me before we start this presentation at all. I was born and grew up in Pakistan. I came to Germany about 4.5-5 years ago. I've done my Bachelor's of Science in Geography here in Germany. I've been working for over 5 years as a voluntary translator and tutor for refugees in Germany, so particularly Pakistani refugees who came to Europe, especially during the 2015 refugee wave we had here. As Marit said before, I'm an activist of the climate civil disobedience movement, Extinction Rebellion, for over a year now. And I'm also a member of the Generation Stiftung Jugendrat, which is how I came to do this presentation. I'm currently working for refugees and Germans with a migratory background in violence prevention. Just so you guys have a bit of a background of who I am, what I'm going to be talking about. The thing is, even though I'm quite active in the climate movement here in Germany also, I'm not a child. I'm 23 years old. I'm a young person. That's what you would classify. That's why what I'll be talking about today is just generally activism amongst children, amongst young people, and what inspired me to start getting active, and why I think we need more children between the ages of 13 to 18, and young people also, just to get politically active and start putting pressure on the politicians in every country. So yeah, what I want to start with first of all is just a general list of some child activists who have inspired me quite a bit and actually motivated me to get active. We all know, I'll just use my mouse a bit. We all know Greta Thunberg. She's pretty well known in the Western world. But for me, the people who actually motivated me to get active were activists in the developing world, in places such as my own country, Pakistan. So we have the child rights activist Iqbal Masih. I'll be talking about him a bit later, so I won't say too much about him. Malala Yousafzai, I'm pretty sure some of you have heard of her. She's also a Nobel Prize laureate and an activist for female education in Pakistan, in the north of Pakistan. Helena Gualinga, she's an environmental and human rights activist. She's 17 years old and a huge activist also for indigenous rights in South America. I'll also be talking about her a bit further on this presentation, so I won't say too much. And last of all, on the right side, Payal Jangid. She's only 17 years old, and she comes from a small village in the north of India. And her biggest accomplishment was the abolishment of child marriages in her village. And she's an advocate for stopping child marriages in India because it's forbidden by law, but it's not being enforced. And even though she's quite young, 17 years old, she's accomplished a lot. She organizes protests with other women and children in her villages and the surrounding villages to stop child marriages. So I want to talk about two of these people who inspired me quite greatly to become active. And the first person I want to talk about is Helena Gualingi. Here are two quotes about her, from her. I'll just read them. We value the forest as much as we value people because we believe it has a spirit. We have had to stand up to big corporations and corrupt governments trying to get into our territories. Helena Gualinga is half Finnish, half Ecuadorian, if I'm not mistaken. And she comes from an indigenous tribe called the Sarayaka. And what they've had was in 2002, the year when Gualinga was born, the Ecuadorian military and another fossil fuel company actually entered the lands of her tribes in order to conduct seismic oil exploration. And even though the tribe did not give their permission to the government that they could do that, they still came in and conducted these tests. The fossil fuel company, placed about 1.5 tons of explosives in their forest, and it destroyed sacred sites and sacred lands of their tribe. So what I want to emphasize is that she was born into an issue that she didn't have a choice of taking part in. She had to become active because her tribe was active, and from the date she was born, she was thrust into this argument. And in 2012, the Sarayaku community, her tribe, took the Ecuadorian government to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights over the incident, and they won. And this is why Helena started her activism. She was inspired by her own family, by her own tribe. And now she's regularly seen at climate strikes. She spoke at the COP25 in Madrid, Spain. She spoke about her concern of the Ecuadorian government making deals with oil companies so that they can extract oil from indigenous lands. And her biggest accomplishment, which I would say is quite amazing for a 17-year-old, is that she's also a spearheader of the campaign called Polluters Out. And this project involves 200 young climate activists, scientists, indigenous people, at over 40 countries in the world. And what they want to do is they want to remove fossil fuel industries from every sphere of influence in politics. So I'll just read the three pillars of their demands. They want to remove fossil fuel industry influence and financing from political negotiations. They want to remove fossil fuel industry influence from panels and discussions at the UN Climate Change Conference, because that is a huge factor also. And they want to add indigenous rights to the Paris Agreement, because even though we speak a lot about the Paris Agreement, I do believe what's in it is correct, but several people forget that the most vulnerable people who are affected by the climate crisis and these big companies, those are indigenous peoples, and their rights have been ignored in the Paris Agreement. So that is what she's currently doing right now, and she currently lives in Finland. and is completing her schooling there and wants to go to university, but at the same time is very politically active. I want to move on. If I'm speaking too fast, please tell me to slow down, because I have a tendency to speak very quickly. The next person I want to talk about is an inspiration from my home country of Pakistan. His name is Iqbal Masih. It was actually his death anniversary last week, and not many people know him. Here's a quote from him. I just want to read it one more time. "No child should ever use a work tool. The only work tools that a child should use are pens and pencils." So who is this? I have written some points about him. Iqbal Masih, he was born into a poor Christian family on the countryside in Punjab, which is a province in Pakistan. What happened was that his family had a debt with a carpet manufacturer of about 600 rupees. If you were to convert that, that's about €2.50. That's it. And the family couldn't pay that debt back, so they traded in their son, Iqbal Masih, who was then 4 years old, to become a bonded laborer for the carpet manufacturer. And even though Pakistan outlawed bonded labor in 1992, there was no enforcement of this law. So he was basically stuck in this position with several other, forced into cramped conditions in carpet factories, barely fed, barely given any water, basically treated like slaves in order to manufacture carpets. The thing with Iqbal was that even though he was in this position, he didn't give up hope. After about 6 years, after one failed escape attempt, he managed to escape successfully. And he basically joined the Bonded Liberation Front, which is an organization from India, but is also active in Pakistan, and they are active in trying to remove bonded labor in both countries. So he went there and joined their organization and exposed the abuse of children by Pakistan's carpet mafia to the world. He gave speeches all around the world about bonded labor, bonded slavery of children in Pakistan. He actually advocated for the release of 3,000 Pakistani children from bonded slavery, and was successful also. So 3,000 children who are still living today thank their existence to him. The thing which is so inspirational about Iqbal Masih is that at the age of 12, he was murdered, shot dead in Pakistan by, it's not sure 100%, but some people have this the suspicion that the carpet mafia ordered him to be murdered. And that is something which really, really hits me, because this person was thrown into the role of an activist. And even though he knew it was such a dangerous thing to do, especially in a country like Pakistan, he stuck with it. He was facing the carpet mafia, one of the biggest mafias in Pakistan, with untold amount of money and weapons. And even then, he didn't stop giving his speeches. He didn't stop advocating. And he actually paid the ultimate price in the end. He was shot dead. And exactly, that's what inspires me the most. What I want to also say from this point of view is that I chose these two activists as inspiration, because even though I am a huge fan of Greta Thunberg, I find what she's doing and several other European child activists inspirational. I do feel that in Western media that there is a lack of attention being given to activists who come from poorer countries, be it Pakistan or Ecuador or India, or even different African countries such as Cameroon, Ghana. That is something which still spurs me and makes me move and keep being politically active, because I think these people have done so much and earned so much respect. Why do I believe that children have to become politically active? One reason I already told you guys. The other reason is this graph I just wanted to show you. I know we've had several discussions from brilliant speakers during this webinar, and you guys probably have an idea about what the climate crisis is. This is just a graph about CO2 emissions in billions of tons since 1880 worldwide. This is the worldwide average. And the orange line you see there is the decrease we need to meet in order to hit 1.5 degrees global warming. That is what we have to arrive at in order to keep in agreement in line with the Paris Agreement. Why do I think that children have to get active and young people? Quite simply, in 1988, we had the establishment of the IPCC. 2005, we had the signing of the Kyoto Protocol. And 2015, we had the signing of the Paris Agreement. If you look at all these things, which were negotiated by adults, by politicians, by their bureaucracy and everything they've done, we can still see one thing. The CO2 emissions are increasing. They're not going down. And yeah, this is what I want to show you guys. Look at what adults have accomplished, and nothing against adults. It's more against politicians, who are mostly adults. But they've signed several agreements, they've signed several protocols, they've established several organizations, and still the CO2 emissions are going up. This is my last slide, and this is just a world map showing different urban centers across the world, which are at risk of at least 0.5 meters of sea level rise by 2050. Doesn't sound like a lot, but means that several urban areas could be wiped out by this. What I want to give as a last note in this case is that if I zoom in to the slide, if you guys look at that red dot in Pakistan, that's my hometown. If we look at all these urban centers, most of them are in poorer countries, poorer regions of the world. That means most people displaced by this one effect of climate change. There's several effects. I'm not saying that the other ones aren't important, but this is just one which can really make it clear. Most of these urban centers, most of these people live in the poorest areas of our country, of our world. And we in Europe, we in the US, we in Australia, in the Western world, we have the privilege of being able to protest, to get active without fearing for our lives, without fearing for huge repercussions, such as Iqbal Masih, who is no longer with us today. So that's what I want to say to children. That's what I want to say to young people, that we have this chance. It's not that we have an excuse, I don't want to get active because blah, 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 blah. This. No, you guys have the choice. You guys have everything you need. You guys have political protection. You don't have to worry about huge things such as losing your life. You guys have that privilege. So that's what I want everybody in the Western world, especially children and young people, to get more active, because the people who are most affected by climate crisis are the people who can't raise their voice. They don't have that privilege. So that's what I want to give as a last sounding note for this presentation. And if you guys want anything, if you guys want to know about my sources, I have a list of sources here as well. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Sultan. It was really nice the way you zoomed out in this webinar. We started out with a very global perspective, and then we zoomed into Trøndelag and Trondheim. So I really appreciate this way of ending the seminar and reminding us all that this is something that concerns children and young people all over the world, and of course all the activists from different parts of the world. Are there any questions? So please post them on the chat right now. If not, we would still like to encourage you to post questions on Sultan's email. No questions? No?
I haven't received any questions, but we've posted your email address in the chat, Sultan. So if anyone have any questions afterward, they'll can contact you directly.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yumar. So before we finish off this webinar, I would like to thank all the presenters. I really appreciate their presentations and being so flexible when we had to turn it into this digital webinar. And I really enjoyed all the different talks from different perspectives. And I would also like to thank everyone who's been watching us and posting questions and comments. So thank you very much. See you. Bye.